Okay, I must have done it right. All right, well, welcome everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. We are moving into our second phase of the foster care negotiated rulemaking process. Typically, you'll hear it referred to as foster care NRM. Um, and so we appreciate you being with us today. Before we get started, though, we'll have the LD team introduce ourselves. And then while we're doing that, if you all could put in the chat your name, the region that you're in, the CPA that you're a part of, if applicable, or your stakeholder group, and then a good email that we can communicate with you, that would be great. And then I'll start with introductions. My name is Jason Churchwell. I'm an administrator on the LD Workforce Development team. And I have been identified as the lead for both the group care negotiated rulemaking process and the foster care process. And so I'll be with you here today. And then Marge, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yep, thanks, Jason. I'm Marge Trudnowski, and I am the project manager for the foster care NRM project. Eva?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Eva Freemuth. I am the policy manager for the NRM project for DCYF. Felix.
Good morning. My name is Felix Fernandez, and I am the research and data analyst on the NRM team. I'll hand it over to Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Nkango. I'm the Workforce Development Training Support Specialist, and I will be taking notes today. And Libby?
Hi, I'm Libby Wagner. I'm a policy and rules advisor for our policy and rules office. And I'm responsible for making sure that the language matches our WAC standards.
Thank you. Is anybody monitoring the chat for us? Sorry. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? So before we move into our listening and learning session, I want to provide a little bit of history on how we got to our listening and learning sessions, and want to also give everybody here a shout out for the work that you do. We understand that foster care is much needed and difficult, and often you don't get the acknowledgement that you deserve. We also understand that with the fictive kin movement, there's a lot of confusion and frustration. And so we just want to acknowledge that we appreciate the work that you do, that we understand the frustrations and the confusions, and we want to be a part of resolving those and solutions. And so as we look to WAC amendments, that's one opportunity that we can use to make sure that we hear your voice, and that we try to correct any of the confusion that we have. I also want to assure everyone here that in our leadership meetings, we acknowledge and we understand, and that we're doing our part to try to figure out solutions and resolve issues and give acknowledgement. So just a big huge thank you to everybody here today. We appreciate you and the work that you do. Leading up to our listening and learning sessions, we did an orientation process. We had 12 sessions. We provided some general information on the process. We asked for feedback from you all. We did some surveys and got feedback. And so we accumulated all that feedback. We tried to find some patterns within that feedback. And then we looked at the various WAC that were identified as either areas of concern, areas of confusion, or maybe where things just aren't quite addressed correctly. And so we use that to inform the WAC that we're going to be talking about over the next couple months here at our listening and learning sessions. And so that's kind of just the brief history on how we got here. And so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is kind of a visual of principles that we developed through the group care process that we thought would be very fitting for both processes. And this is kind of a place where we can always come back to check ourselves, to make sure that we're prioritizing things correctly, that we're talking about things correctly, that we have a shared understanding of the outcomes that we're wanting to achieve. We're not looking at outcomes in terms of what we come up with and having a perfect rule or perfectly written rule. What we're really focused on is how can we create a process where we're hitting these principles and these values, that we're hearing everybody's voice, and that we're whatever rules we come up with, they line up with these kind of 4 core principles. And so first and foremost, safety and well-being. So as we look to amend rules and talk through rules, we always want to set ourselves around the concept of safety and well-being. And that if we want to get rid of a rule, that we clearly understand that we don't agree that it's a safety or well-being rule, or as we maybe create new rules or adjust rules, that they're hitting that safety and well-being mark. We also want to make sure that our rules are developmentally and culturally appropriate for the youth and the children that we're serving. We haven't touched WAC really in I think it's about 20 years. And so a lot's different. And so we just want to make sure that our WACs represent our developmental needs of the youth that we have, as well as the cultural needs that they have. We also want to consider the barriers and burdens that our rules cause to providers, and how can we address those? How can we make sure that they're minimum licensing requirements and not like a maximum licensing requirement? We want to make sure that they're clearly understood and that they can be met. And then kind of our differentiation and flexibility goes hand in hand with that one, in that, is there a way that we can write rules so that they can apply differently depending on maybe how a home is set up or built, or the types of youth that are being served, that there's multiple ways to meet a WAC and not just like this one size fits all approach. So as we move forward with this project, we'll be showing this slide pretty much throughout. So just be keeping these things in mind as we begin to have conversation and as we begin to negotiate things. Next slide. So we have a short, fun video that we want to play for you. It's funny, and we think it kind of really speaks to the totality of what this project is going to entail, and kind of how folks might feel and how it might look throughout the process. And so we just want to share it with you really quick before we get going.
Drinking warm water before
boy,
bed
okay.
balances
All
blood
right,
sugar
all right.
levels and reverses type 2. Thousands of people are apparently.
Who knew you were going to get
I'm
educated
going to talk
on
to you
blood
about the
sugar?
things I've learned in my
Okay,
journey,
wait.
most from experience.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so share it here, Brenda.
I would stop sharing your screen first
Okay.
and then reshare it. And when you click the button to share, there's a little icon. There's a little icon that up in, I think it's the upper right-hand area that says share audio sound. Here,
Sorry, guys.
that's okay. Let me
Brenda, do you have the
Yeah,
slide up and
yeah,
running?
I'm pulling up the slide deck. I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay. I thought I had to just pick play. think some of you've seen this. I recognize names who've been who attended last week.
Okay, can you see the video now?
Yep,
Here we go.
thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, for playing that. So just
At Vistaprint, you print your brand on.
quick takeaways from that is really just that we have a lot of groups coming together. We're going to need some leaders. We're going to need some folks who are going to come along and participate. And it might look a little bit unorganized at first, but things will start coming together. We'll start working together. We'll find our rhythm throughout this negotiation process. And when we get all through said and done with this, we're going to have a WAC that we can all be proud of and that we all participated in. So again, thank you for sharing that with us. So really quickly, I just kind of want to go over this overall timeline. So January 1st is when we kind of got hired up and started looking at how this process was going to go and how we were going to design it, and how we were going to get from start to finish, how are we going to recruit, moving into we're also, this is where sorry, this is where our orientation fits in. This is where these listening and learning sessions fit in. And so once we get through our listening and learning sessions, we'll have about a 2-month period of time where we're going to incorporate all the feedback that we've received, all of the different stakeholders and our provider groups. We'll look at WACs. We'll work with Libby and the writing team, and we'll start drafting some WAC that incorporate all of this feedback to it. We'll be starting to do a lot of research to make sure that whatever amendments that we make, that they line up with either best practice guidelines or like CRC or CDC guidelines, make sure that they meet our Fed requirements. And then in October, we're going to start our actual negotiation process where we'll be able to get some WAC in front of everybody that already has incorporated as much information as we can into it so that we're not just starting from scratch. And then hopefully those sessions will run a little bit more smoother and we'll be able to get through things. And then I won't go into detail, but as you kind of look forward, our negotiations will wrap up, and then we'll move into what we're calling kind of the polishing and filing. So that's where our writing team will make sure that all the terminology is the same throughout, that the structure is the same throughout. We'll have our AAGs take a look at things to make sure we didn't miss something in terms of federal law that's out there or state law that's out there. And then our leader, Ruben Reeves, will do a final review. And then at that point, it'll be all polished and we'll file it. And you'll notice that there's a 1-year gap between when we file it and when they go live. And that 1-year gap is intentional to make sure that we have training covered, to make sure that we have our process guides and any kind of tools that are needed to help understand the intents and apply those intents. So we'll have that full year to get up to speed so that once they go live July 2026, everybody understands the rules, is trained up to the rules, and are going to be able to successfully follow those rules. And then Marge, did you pop something in the chat? Okay. All right, next slide, please. So we've broke down our listening and learning sessions into the different WAC that we're going to be talking through. And so last week we had a set of WAC that we went through, and now this week we have a new set. So for today, we're going to be looking at 1340, which is the renewal WAC. We'll have 1375, which is our pre-service training or the training before you get licensed. And then 1380 will be your ongoing training. And then we'll talk about 1385, which is our overall capacity WAC. Next slide, please.
So let's go back. Let's go back. Jason, this is the point where we're going to shut the
Okay.
PowerPoint on everybody, and then we're going to talk about the 4 WAC that we did not that are new for this week. I see a lot of people who attended last week. So this is the PowerPoint's the same, like I said in the chat, but here are the 4 new WACs that we're covering this week.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Marge. And then Eva, if you don't mind, or whoever's controlling the document, if you could make that bigger for the team. Welcome. I see a lot of familiar faces from the last session of last week. So thank you for coming back, as well as new faces. So welcome. I hope that you enjoy the time here and you also come back to further sessions. This part of the listening learning session, as Marge and Jason shared, we will be sharing WAC. Now, this WAC that we'll be reviewing today, it came from feedback. What we did in the past was we opened up what we call NRM feedback spreadsheets. We sent them out to caregivers and we asked for feedback on all WAC. And some of that feedback that we received is very clear, and the NRM team will be rewriting WAC based upon that feedback and those recommendations. And that will be shared with you down the road. However, there's some WAC that receive feedback, but it's kind of all over the place and it's unclear to us what really needs to be changed. And for that reason, we want to open up for discussion. We have questions about this WAC of why certain things should change, or it could have been comments such as this WAC needs to be changed, but we don't know why because that feedback wasn't provided. So what better way to, other than discuss this with you? As we move through this WAC, there's kind of 2 thoughts that I want you to keep in mind. So the first one is this WAC clear? Are you understanding the intent and what is being communicated? And the answer, if the answer is yes, then great. We maybe there's no discussion. But if you're answering no, someone else is probably answering no too. And raise your hand. Let's talk about what's unclear, or if you don't understand the intent, we can also provide background on the WAC or certain topics within the WAC. Also, keep in mind, is there better language to be used other than the current language being presented? We have the opportunity to open up this WAC and really use plain talk, use less jargony language. So we are taking all feedback. If you have specific ways that you would like to see things rewritten, please raise your hand and share those comments. So the first WAC that we're going to be looking at today is 1375. And that is, what training am I required to have before I am licensed? And I will break down this WAC here in a second. The first piece of this WAC, it's what needs to be completed prior to be licensing, what pre-service training. The second section is federal requirements, but that is more towards first aid and CPR. And then the third section of this WAC, it breaks down to the requirements for CPR. And before we take time to read this and review, we do want to talk about the 7 area of improvements. We're not going to go into all the 7 areas, but I'll put them in the chat just so that you have reference to them. And we want to focus on number 7, which is training requirements and expectations for providing cultural, responsive, LGBTQI+, affirming, and trauma-informed care. Marge or Jason, did one of you want to tackle of what CCT is working on when it comes to area number 7?
Yeah, so there's a big revamp of caregiver core training that will cover the training portion of the DS settlement. And so that should get all completed by, that will be completed by July of 2026 when the WACs go live.
All right, so when we see number 1, before you are licensed for the first time, pre-service training will be required for, at minimum, the primary caregiver in your home. So when we see pre-service training, we're referring to our core training, core caregiver training, CCT. And that's the language is put in there to be ambiguous just in case that title was to change. But we'll take the next, go ahead, Whitney.
So is it required training given by the department or the alliance?
The alliance is contracted with the department, so that is our training source. It's done by the alliance.
Right. So if the training is required to be completed by the department or the department's contractee, that needs to be clear here. Because it's not just training in general, it's a specific training that needs to be given or taken.
Great, thank you, Whitney, for the feedback. With number 1, is there any other comments? All right, we'll move to the second section. Is there anything that's not being understood about first aid, CPR, and the bloodborne pathogens requirements? And then Whitney, I can't tell if you raised your hand again.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I have a dog that's going nuts. Is there a specific licensing requirement or so when it comes to the department, can we take any CPR class that's considered age appropriate, or are there only things that are approved, like approved providers for these?
So if you go to, two answers to your question. If you go to section 3, and again, it's further down on the requirements. It's the department approved first aid and CPR training. It must be an accredited and nationally recognized standards.
Got it.
So that's the first part. And then the second part to your question is, say you are licensed for infants. The expectation is for you to have that age appropriate infant piece, certification of your CPR. If you were licensed for, say, only teenagers, then that infant wouldn't be asked of you. And then I believe I saw someone else, maybe it was Renee, that came off mute. I don't know about accident or not. All right, this was mainly selected to give you the update on the CCT and what is coming to the pre-service trainings and how we are going to meet the 7 areas of improvement with this WAC. Before we move on to the next one, are there any last questions? All right, let's go on to the next WAC. And that is WAC 1340. What do I do to renew my license? And I wanted to start, first let's give a minute to read the WAC. And there are 2 parts to this WAC. One, there's the informing you of you will receive a renewal notice sent to you 90 days prior to your license expiration date. And with that language of a warning, really, if you do not receive this renewal notice, it's really up to you to contact your licensor and to begin that renewal process. The department should be meeting its own timelines. But sometimes letters get lost in the mail or systems go down. So just keep in mind that you should also be aware of your renewal date. And then the second piece is really kicking off that renewal process of we need to receive your application and the background authorization form to conduct a background check on you for renewal of your license. So I want to open it up and see if any caregivers here or licensors, or if they're in the room, has any caregivers gone through a renewal recently or in the past? Whitney.
Yes, I submitted everything 2 months prior to the date, and then they didn't look at it till the week after my license lapsed, and then I didn't get the information until this year. And I renewed last year, so, which is what my question is related to. Like what's where are the requirements of the department and the response to our renewal information? Is that in WAC or is that in internal policy?
Those would be internal policies. I don't have that policy off the top of my head, but we can definitely look into that and make note of it. Christina?
I also had a renewal that was 3 years ago, and everything was done fine and on time, but like I never got a new updated license. Like I have a card that says I'm a foster parent that expired 3 years ago because I never got the updated one. So I agree with Whitney. I think there needs to be some clarity on what's the expectation for DCYF, making sure that they actually send us the updated paperwork once the license is renewed.
Thank you, Christina. Jason?
Yeah, sorry, I should have said this earlier. So when we think about the WAC review, part of the system improvement plan is also to update policy, which is a lot of what we're talking about here. So we want to capture those notes because there can often be a discrepancy in terms of the WAC says what a provider is supposed to do. The policy says what a licensor is supposed to do. And so if the policy doesn't line up with the WAC, then it doesn't flow well. So these are all things we want to capture so that when we get to the policy writing phase, we can make sure that policy addresses these things that you're bringing up.
This is Vaughn Hicks, and I'm a licensed caregiver, and I went through recertification about a year ago. I do recall, I'm going off of memory. I do recall getting an email telling me, hey, you've got this much time. And then I turned in all my stuff in the appropriate amount of time. I do remember having to reach back out to the licensor for my new recertification document. But everything other than that went smoothly with the reminder, and I was also timely with my paperwork back.
Thank you. And we will take note of those. We're also going to circle back to 1340. So if you were able to share on this WAC, we're going to circle back to it. We're going to move on to 1380. And that is, what training must I complete after I am licensed? And one of the things that I want to focus on, or that we want to focus on here to open up discussion, is this first section that states you and your licensor must develop an individual in-service training plan. So for those of you who recently went through that or have gone through the renewal process, do you know what this individual in-service training plan is? Do you know what that's referring to?
And if you did get one, can you talk about what was in it?
I recall after I was recertified, this is Vaughn, that I had an in-depth conversation over the phone with my licensor because I was trying to understand the renewal process. Even though I just got recertified, I always have questions. And I remember them going over areas that I need to focus on when I was in the midst of relicensing. Does that make sense? I remember them talking about there's different areas that you need to make sure you're getting training in through the Alliance courses. And she broke it down into categories.
Yeah.
And she talked about it. I was making some notes on the phone with her, and I tried my best to do that. I think I'm probably one of the exceptions of I just go for as much training as I can get. So there was never a problem when it came time to getting the recertification, but I do recall the categories and us discussing those for me.
Thank you. And before we go on to Christina, I just want to recognize Whitney's chat in the chat box. Why is a training plan necessary? If someone needs assistance getting their training hours, this should be offered by the department, but shouldn't be required for those for us who can meet the requirements independently without this extra work for all involved. So I'm going to hold on answering your question. I'm going to go to Christina and I will circle back to yours, Woody. Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we had an individual in-service training plan. I know we were told when we were initially licensed to make sure that we took one specific training, just based on conversations that we had with our licensor. But if there's some kind of like, you need this many credits in this topic and this many credits in this topic, I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so circling back to Whitney's and Christina's point is this in-service training plan is really we're asking for you to complete your renewal hours by the time that your renewal comes up. And if you take a look at section at 2A, 2B, 2C, and 3, or specifically the section 2, that's what happens if you do not complete your renewal hours. So is that clear based upon this WAC here, what we're reading?
Not really, because it seems individual. I mean, I feel like we all know that there's like a certain number of hours. You need this many for your first renewal, you need slightly fewer for your second renewal. But that's not individual. That's just like a standard policy. So individual makes it seem like everybody's requirements are going to be different and tailored, and I don't know that that's true.
We're taking note, Christina.
Whitney?
I think instead of requiring a plan, this is where it should explicitly state what are the training requirements. And that might be covered in a different WAC, but to me, it would make more sense to say, you need this many hours of this type of training, this many hours in this category, and say that here rather than requiring a plan, because 2 makes sense to me, leave 2 in, but 2 right now doesn't make sense because it's saying if you fail to complete the training requirements, those aren't clearly stated in 1. 1 just says a plan. That's not our training requirement.
I'm curious.
I agreed.
Thank you. I'm curious with our CPA partners here, do you all do a individual training plan with your caregivers? Don't all talk at once.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. We provide the alliance trainings for our caregivers. Now, if a caregiver has something specific that they would need like addressing, then we would then provide like an additional training for them. But we essentially kind of do general trainings for all of our caregivers. And if someone needs something more in another area, then we would do that. So I guess yes and no in a way. It just depends on the provider, if that makes sense.
And then when you do your when you do training for your providers, is it through the Alliance or is it through the Muckleshoot tribe or both?
It's both. So some of the trainings or the classes will be through like, for instance, like positive Indian parenting, we'll probably do that through the tribe. And then other courses will refer them through the Alliance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And this is Renee. I'm with Olive Crest. We do have a training form that we filled out. That's a state form, and it does break it down by the categories, and we put suggested trainings on it and have our parents sign it and go over it and review it for them. And to the question of individual training, that's based on what you're licensed for and the care of the kids in your care. And that's kind of what we go over on the form with our parents. So it is individualized based on their license and what we feel is good for the family. And then once they become licensed, we provide them with ongoing training. There's the form that's on the website for foster parents about ongoing training, and the hour requirements, the categories is on there, and the Alliance for training.
Yeah, what trainings at the Alliance will cover the categories?
Correct. And the Alliance just updated that so that it's more clear now too.
Okay.
So if we were to look to both 1340 and 1380, we're looking at these things that caregivers are required to do before or to complete that license, right? Anything or the renewal process, anything on their end that needs to be done is between these two WACs. So the idea that we want to present to this group is combining these two WACs and making them into one, laying out what the requirements are on the caregiver's end. So again, what you're seeing today is not final. It's more, we want your feedback. We want to know if you agree with this, or if you want to keep these two separate. But what you're seeing is in 1 and 2 at the top is nothing was done to 1340. However, it was merged with 1380, and we tried to simplify the language based upon feedback. And we used that more plain talk, right? Instead of this individual in-service plan, it just reads as you must complete ongoing training requirements for the renewal of your foster care license based upon your training plan. So this idea of a training plan being discussed, I forget who mentioned it from their CPA, but our internal policy does state that there does need to be the conversation with the licensor and the caregiver of talking about what areas need to be covered in the next set of training. The hours are outlined in policy. And I think the reason that they're in policy and not WAC is over the years they have changed. I know before it used to be a descending number, and now it's just 24 across the board. So I think it used to be 32 your first 3 set of years, and it went down to 28 your second set of 3 years, and then any time after that it was 24, and now it's just 24 across the board. I have Jason and then Christina.
Yeah, just a couple questions I'd love to get some feedback on in terms of having required trainings included. So part of the DS settlement talks about some specific training categories around LGBTQIA, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. So I'd love to hear some feedback in terms of if we were to add some of those as mandatory trainings that were clearly outlined here. And then additionally, when we think about like a in-service plan over a 3-year period, what would folks think about the WAC being more detailed, that like in year 1, like here's a mandatory training, in year 2, here's a mandatory training, year 3, or not being that specific and maybe just saying that within your first licensing cycle, you have to take these. Like, what are folks' thoughts about the department being more descriptive about training, or is it good to be less prescriptive and allow folks to have more autonomy over what they take?
So are you asking about 2 different questions? I want to clarify that. Are you asking about 2 different points right now?
I probably asked 4 questions within that question.
Okay, can we just go section by section? Because I want to give feedback.
Yeah, so the first question is in terms of the renewal period. If the WAC was very specific about what trainings, and it wouldn't be all the trainings, so let's just say maybe there's 8 hours of the training that the department says you have to take these, and then we make those available to folks in a e-learning type atmosphere and say you have to take these. That's question number 1. Thoughts on that?
I think it would be helpful if whatever is mandatory is listed as mandatory, and whatever is open for us to choose is listed as such, if that makes sense.
I also want to recognize Whitney's comments in the chat. Eva, I don't know if you could capture those in your notes when you get the chance. But Whitney wants explicit as possible about the hours and the type of trainings that are being required. If the hours or categories change, then the WAC should change. And I did leave some things out, but Whitney will make sure all of those comments get captured in the feedback.
So question 2, if we're ready to move on, was for in-service training, it's a 3-year licensing cycle. What if we broke it down so that there was a year 1 training requirement, the year 2, and the year 3 as it relates to whatever the department is saying is mandatory?
I would hesitate with that, Jason. This is Renee, only because I think year 1, it would be great if we had like, say, pay training. We require that of our families at our agency because it's a good background for families for not knowing what kids you're coming into care with. But I think beyond that, we like to keep our training specific to the needs of the family. So making additional mandatory requirements, I think I would hesitate to do that.
I think, I don't know if I would break it down by year, like year 1, you have to have this training. I think it is a good idea. Like overall, like during your 3-year licensing cycle, you need to complete these trainings in these categories. I think that's totally fine, but giving families the flexibility to take them throughout the 3 years would be helpful.
Christina, you've had that hand up for a while.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm wondering if the training requirements are changed in internal policy, how you're making sure that foster parents know that. Because I think I was thinking I had to do 30 hours before my license is up for renewal this summer. And apparently it's only 24 and I didn't know that. I think it would be helpful if you're doing it internally in policy to make sure that your licensor is sending out those notifications. Especially like 1 year in advance would be helpful. Like, so not, oh, you're up for renewal in 3 months, don't forget you have all this training, but like a year before your license expires. Hey, just a reminder, make sure you get your 24 hours of training in. You've got 1 more year, but make sure you budget for that because it's a lot of time. And if something has changed, let us know.
Good points. Anybody else?
I don't think it should be broken down by year, like our first year being licensed. I think it should be broken down by license. So the first year license requires this many hours. Sorry. And then the other, the 24 for the preceding ones, that needs to be written out. For me, breaking it down by year is just way too many requirements for new foster parents.
So would folks have the same response if it was just the first year that we said, so here's your pre-service training requirements, and then within your first year, you have to take these, but the rest of it is up to you? Would anybody change their response, or would it be the same responses?
Does it have to be required to be completed within the first year or within the first licensing cycle?
So in this scenario, it would be your first year of licensing, you'd have to complete this training. But then every other year and every other renewal after that, there would be nothing that would be required in WAC for you to take other than a total number.
So what you're saying, Jason, if you're a brand new caregiver, then within the first year, these are required to take, and then that,
Correct.
and then that's it. Okay, all right, thank you. Whitney?
So is this a current requirement or is this something
No.
we're proposing?
Yeah.
I'm not, this is just scenarios so that I have as much information as I can have because I'm involved in a lot of other conversations and meetings, and these questions come up a lot. And so I'm just picking folks' brains so that I can have your perspective to bring to the table when these conversations are happening.
Okay, so I would say do not require the first year to have any specific training at all. There is so much you are just processing as a foster parent that requiring a specific category of training just to me would be overwhelming. Now, if we want to require that they complete something within the first year, I can understand that, but to me, you have 3 years for your license. Give them some breathing room to do it within their 3 years.
Okay.
I agree with her, Jason. It's a lot to monitor, I think, on the part of the department and the agencies to have that training done in the first year. And then also we're putting our parents in WAC violation if they don't do it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
I would agree with Renee and Whitney as well. And I think any trainings that the department is going to require of families, whether it's like a specific training or categories, having e-learnings is super helpful. I think, Jason, you mentioned that just to give them the flexibility to take it on their own time. So just something to consider.
Yeah, just to follow up, I think at this point, whatever like would end up being required would have to be an e-learning. I've made that very clear that that's the case. No decisions have been made about any of this, so I'm just really picking brains to get perspectives to bring to the table.
All right, before we move on to the next WAC, I do want to circle back to the idea of combining these WACs together where all the requirements are for renewal are listed out. Keep in mind that with this feedback, the training section may grow. Do we like keeping the WACs separate, or do we want to go with the idea of combining both of the WACs? Group? Whitney says combine. Any other thoughts? Anyone
I like
against it?
combining them.
Christina, combine?
I
I
would
just want-
agree with combining for clarity.
I guess one thought I have is if a provider doesn't renew, like right now it's broken down like this is what you have to complete after your license. So there is, there are some requirements for caregivers, like what they need to do. And so I'm wondering if someone would see that, be like, well, what if I'm not planning to renew my license? Like, how do you make sure families are, completing the trainings that are required of them?
If they're not planning to renew?
Yeah, if they, or they don't, yeah.
Okay,
If
so
they get to
suggest
that
some
spot.
language around that idea.
Mhm.
I think what Nora's trying to say, and she can correct me, is we want to make sure parents are doing the training. Like sometimes they wait till the last year or the last minute, but we want them to do it sooner. And if they don't renew, then they don't do any training for 3 years.
And I do
That's
want to
correct.
recognize,
Yeah.
I do want to recognize Whitney's comments, or I actually see your hand up. Do you want to come on mic, Whitney?
Sure. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking way too much, but I know this is a draft, but under the WAC, like the title of it says, what do I do to renew my license? Since we're talking about actual, is this only for the renewal or is this for the, are we combining it with the new license as well?
So the idea would be to combine for renewal.
Okay,
If we
perfect.
looked
Then that
at,
makes- okay, ignore
we-
that comment then.
well, I want to make this clear that we looked at 1375, which is what training am I required to do before I license. So then the expectation would be anything after would be under this section.
Okay.
But again, this is a proposal. If we do prefer to have a WAC separate for training that's due at renewal, we can go that direction as well.
Okay, and then my other random thought, since we're kind of throwing things out to be discussed later, instead of a plan, would it make, like, if we're trying to get foster parents to do it sooner rather than later in their licensing period, could we have something not in WAC, but where I can check in with my licensor, check in with the team and say, and instead of having this plan, say, hey, have I met the requirements? What else do I need? Because for me, I mean, I guess that's what a plan would address. For me, having the plan is a lot of extra work when the alliance trainings don't line up a lot of times with my schedule, or I have to take what's available because it's available and it might not fit the categories. And so if there was something we could do to like check in with my licensor to say, okay, this is what I've required, is it going to meet the categories, and have that discussion would be great.
I think, and I'm realizing I did get an email saying what the training categories were and how many I needed about a year before my license was up for renewal. So that's just on me. Good job, guys. But as I'm looking at it, it does, so it breaks down like you have to have at least one training from these 4 different categories. But looking at the alliance, I can't tell easily what, if any, of the trainings that I've taken so far fall into those categories. So if you're going to say you have to have certain trainings from certain categories, it would be great if the alliance could actually lump them into categories so that I could see in my transcript how many hours from each category I have.
The Alliance actually just updated that on their website, and there is a list that shows what categories they all fall under.
Okay, it's not in the transcript part. Like if I look at what
No, it's not. It's kind of it's under training. I can't remember. It wasn't clear how to get to it, but they did just do it, which is helpful for all of us when recommending trainings to our families, because some of them go over different multiple categories too.
Yeah.
So Christina, you want to see it broken down in the transcript so that you can.
I mean, that would be nice. That's where I look to see how many credits I have. And then, so then I'm like, okay, so wait, I need one on this. Let me scroll through all the titles and figure out like, well, does this one count? Does that one count?
Yeah. So what we'll do is we can take this off our table, but we'll push that over to the Alliance. I don't know what their system is, their IT system is set up like for transcripts, but we can definitely put the suggestion over to them.
Any other thoughts
One
on these
other
bullets?
random thing is I sometimes get emails about trainings that are not through the Alliance.
Yeah.
Like from DCY. Like there was just one that was like, take this cool training from, I think it's called Strive or something, on like family time. And I'm like, do I get training credit for that or not? And that's not clear. And I have in the past had the experience of taking a training and then being told by my licensor, oh, that doesn't count. I'm like, well, why are you emailing me about it? So DCYF should not be pushing out any trainings, recommended trainings, if we're not going to get credit for them.
And all caregivers, if you do get training credits for attending, and we'll send those certificates out in August. I think I said that before. Our licensors have been messaged, they've been giving that message that to accept them. If you get pushback on that, you need to let us know, let the team know, and then we can take care of it for you. But what I'm hearing Christina say is the inconsistency within DCYF on what we accept and what we don't accept for training hours outside of the Alliance.
One thing I don't like with the writing on this is that training requirements for the renewal, like you have to have it completed for your renewal. To me, it would be better to have it worded like you will have ongoing training throughout your 3-year licensing period. Because the way it's written, somebody could go 3 years and not do any training until the last 2 months of their license. And it wouldn't be a WAC violation.
I think that goes back to what Jason's question was, is like, do we then put, requirements in about what needs to be completed throughout the three-year cycle period?
Yeah, let's definitely take note of the language though of ongoing versus renewal.
Yeah, I think just that would be a little more incentive for some foster parents without making it necessarily a requirement to.
I'm sorry, I missed that last one. So Felix, could you tell me what you want me to type in?
Yes, just the language suggestion of ongoing versus renewal, replacing renewal with ongoing training.
Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Any other thoughts on these WACs? If not, we'll move on to our last WAC to review for today. It's 1385. How do you decide the capacity for my home? So this WAC, we're not going to go in depth to every section, but we'll give the opportunity to review this WAC. This breaks down how the department determines the maximum number, age range, and gender of children, although we are moving away from gender language. One of the questions that came up was, or feedback was, caregivers would like to see the protocols or language around when can I request change in age range or capacity. So some background to this: as you all were licensed, when you went through the assessment process with your home study specialist, they assessed you for a specific number of children, age range, and they give you a license based upon what they assessed. Many caregivers down the road, say a year, 2 years, or maybe 6 years, then request a change. So maybe they focus on teenagers and now they want to focus or encompass younger children or infants. That's a whole different type of an assessment. So I wanted to open up to the group. When is it appropriate for you to request a change in age range or capacity? Or if you have asked for it, what was your experience?
We changed with our last renewal, both age range and capacity. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of looking at what we were going to be able to do with the foster child that we already had, and kind of realizing we wanted to shift the age that we were taking if we took in any more children.
Has anyone changed their capacity or age range during their license? And for what reasons? Or anyone from CPAs, what is that experience with you? Do you do it at any time? Do you only allow it at renewals? How do you approach when someone comes to you to change age range and capacity?
We do it not necessarily, our parents do sometimes. Often it's because of like flu shots, they want to change the age range. But we take it upon ourselves to follow up with families to adjust their license if there's an adoption or if they have a baby.
I think that question that I have that would help the conversation is, how many of you have been on overcapacities, and how long, should an overcapacity be in effect before we start looking at modifying and changing that license during your 3-year cycle? Like for our CPAs, do you guys have a time frame? Okay, we can do an overcapacity for this amount of time, but then after that certain point is, do we modify it so we're not doing an overcapacity?
Yes,
We
Whitney,
tip-
do you want to elaborate on your comment in the chat?
Oh, that was specific to the conversation we had about
Ah.
what was accepted for trainings.
Mhm.
And often we aren't told about the trainings. Like it doesn't count until it's like a renewal process where some of us are like counting our hours and counting our eggs before they hatch, right? But for this wax specifically, in terms of I haven't had experience in changing my license requirements. I've had the department ask me to, and we just weren't ready. But I think when we're having this discussion about how long should they be in effect, or like at what point should changes happen, or do changes happen, we need to look at the department's capacity and what the changes and how long the changes take. Like for me, when we're looking at changing licenses, it's specific to taking in sibling sets that would be outside of that our license capacity, how long they're going to live with us, and all of that. And that needs to be very fluid. But if the department can't keep up with those changes, we shouldn't be requiring something in that change process that can't happen.
Thank you. Nora, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to answer the question about overcapacities. It depends on how long the child's going to be there. Like we've done overcaps for like respite, which are obviously like we have an end date. If the child's going to be there for, more than like a respite placement, then we typically will ask for an overcap for like 30 days. That gives our licensor time to get out to the home to modify the license and then send that to our regional licensor to approve. We had one where we approved it for 6 months, but that was a very specific situation where the family was taking a sibling of children already in the home. But typically it's 30 days or time limited for a respite.
Thank you, Nora. You can see from the purple and 3, we actually added, based upon feedback, the green line, which addresses that you can have an overcapacity exception. Any other thoughts on change in age range and capacity? All right, let's take about a minute or two and review this WAC for any last thoughts or any other thoughts. And then Eva, as people are reading, I think there are some FFPSAs that if you enter that comment, will be highlighted. I think because you have the comment in edit mode, if you were to enter the comment, the FFPSAs will pop up. Oh, I guess not. I thought there were more in this one, but that's the only one, I guess. Any feedback or anything unclear with 1385?
Under 3B, is the RCW referenced intellectual and developmental disabilities, or could it be and or?
Thank you, Whitney.
So we're actually researching that now on the group care side because it's the same language. So we can, we'll get that answer shortly.
Jason or Marge, do you have any other thoughts on 1385 before we close out?
No, I don't. Jason?
All right,
No.
I'll turn it over to Marge.
All right, so we're gonna have Jason pick it up for here, and hopefully I can get the right screen going. What are y'all seeing? Slide deck?
It's the right slide.
Right,
Yeah.
thanks, Brendan. All
Yeah.
right, Jason.
So, sorry, Marge, can you go to the next slide first? I'm gonna mess things up a little bit. So, as of today, we have come up with kind of two different kind of groups. We have our participant group and our stakeholder group. These are living, breathing documents, and so as feedback comes in, if we have things mixed up or we need to add things or separate things, we certainly can do that. So any feedback you have, please pop it in the chat so that we can take those things into consideration. But in a nutshell, when you kind of look at the negotiated rulemaking process, RCW says that the requirement is for impacted parties to be at the table negotiating the rules. But it's not that simple with foster care, in that you have groups that are directly impacted by a rule, and you also have folks that are kind of indirectly impacted by a rule. And so we didn't want to exclude those folks who kind of fit outside of the legal definition. And so we've kind of broke groups into those two different parts. So our participant groups are those that we're identifying as being directly impacted by the rules and that will be a part of the direct negotiations. And that's our community foster homes, our child placing agency, our LD licensors. We have a lived experience youth group that's been working with us on the group care WAC that will also work with us on the foster care WAC. Same with the lived experience parent group. And then we're trying to kind of sort out how the tribal partner group fits in, because we have tribal child placing agencies, but we also have community tribal members who may have children or youth placed in foster care. So that's likely to get teased out here over the next couple months so that we make sure we kind of have that right. And then can you go to the next slide, Marge? And so here's our stakeholder group. So these are the folks that we're saying are impacted by the rule, but not necessarily directly. And so we have, I'm not sure why CPAs are on there, but youth advocates. So like our CASAs, guardian ad litems, maybe Treehouse might fit in here. Attorneys for our children and youth. And then we just have other advocacy groups throughout the state. So I don't know that we have those fully teased out, but maybe like FPAWS or things like that. And then Public Defense, Mockingbird Society, and then Family Connections Amara. So again, let us know if there's other folks who you think are indirectly impacted that we're missing, and same with, and then you can go back up, Marge. Sorry, I'm just going out of order. So I say that to say, requests that we have of you and some insights into what's to come that we're going to need to put together. So each one of those participant groups is going to need to get together as a group outside of this formal process. So for example, all of the CPAs, they're going to have to get together. They're going to have to look at WAC. They're going to have to know what their group wants to negotiate around these WACs. And then those groups are going to have representatives that's going to take the feedback from that larger group and then bring it to our structured negotiation group. And so we're going to need this outside group to meet, and then the reps from that group will come to the table and do the negotiation. And we recognize that this is going to be a big haul. And so what we're thinking is if each group had like 4 reps, then the reps could share this load, and you can figure out how you want your reps to share the load. There's no set way that it has to happen. And we'll provide some more detail also as we lead into the actual negotiations. But we want to bring this up now because we recognize that it might be difficult to get people organized. It might be difficult to identify who has the capacity to be a rep. So we want to help with all of that to the best that we can. We'll help you with getting email. We can give you ideas of how other groups are meeting. If you're not sure how you want to do it, we can talk about how other reps are managing these meetings. We're happy to do all of that. What we don't want to do is we don't want to influence your process. So we won't actually set up the meetings and the invites, and we won't be hosting those meetings. But we're here to help answer questions. We're here to help guide you in any way that we can. So I say all of that, take a deep breath to say, if being a rep sounds interesting to you, you don't have to commit to it, but let us know that it's interesting to you. And then we can reach out and we can provide some more detail and we can help you get your group established. So think about it. If that sounds like something you want to partake in, please let us know. And then we'll help you kind of with the rest. Marge, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm just going to say if you're interested, drop it in the chat. And what we're doing is we're keeping track of those who are interested in maybe becoming reps, and we'll reach out to you later on this summer in August after all our listening and learning are completed.
Thanks, Marge. Now can you bump down 3 or 4 slides?
I sure can.
Thank you. So we'll pause here for a minute. Does anybody have any questions kind of about the big picture in terms of the groups and the reps and how that all looks? I'm happy to answer anything, or any questions, just random questions are fine as well. Okay.
I have a comment. What I'm excited about is to see a lot of you who attended last week are here today as well. And that really helps our process in the listening and learning, and that you are understanding what we're doing to try to move forward and prepare for the negotiations. So I really appreciate those of you who are returning, and also those who are new this morning. This is for us a pretty good group and a good size of a group. So thank you.
Mark, I can't remember if you guys said it, but for those people who maybe are new to this session, the fact that you're meeting every week, so they can come back next week, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Eva. Yes, if you go to our website, so each week we are talking about individual WACs, and we have 2 meetings. And one is Tuesday evening and Thursday mornings. And so each week will be different. Our slide deck, I apologize, it will pretty much remain the same, but the conversation about the WAC is really the meat of our listening and learning, and that will be different each week. Felix, do you have anything to add, Brenda?
Nothing else to add, other than thank you for being here today.
Yep, nothing else to add.
All right. So if there are no other questions, we appreciate you guys being here. And here is our contact information. I will put it into the web or to the chat, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.